Hello, everybody. My name is Cassandra Granada. I am a part of the current senior class of 2024 at Guilford High School in Connecticut. This presentation is for my senior project, but it is also to continue my work to try to spread education about sexual and domestic violence to adolescents. I will be the primary presenter of this video, but for the sections of the video that are talking about domestic violence, Lisbeth Padilla from the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence will be presenting the information. The first thing I would like to do is give a little bit of background about my work, and then Lisbeth will do the same, as well as introduce herself. When I was in 7th grade, I began to advocate for this type of education when I noticed that my fellow peers were not educated about what truly sexual and domestic violence are. At just 13 years old, I had realized that it was a common thing to happen to kids my age, and knew that there was a need for education about this topic. At that time, 13 years old was the average age of people in general actually, who were sexually assaulted, but now it has changed to just 9 years old. Because of these statistics, I decided to focus a lot of my time on this project. I worked with the Shoreline Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Task Force to carry this out, as well as some senators at the time, and I was even supposed to go up to the Capitol to talk about this issue. But that ended up not happening because COVID ended up overlapping at the same time. I recently decided to continue this project once again since I've gotten older, and I realized how much more important it is that children my age, around my age, or even younger than me understand what truly happens in the world so they can protect themselves and protect their friends against sexual violence. I'm hoping that everyone watching this video is going to gain a lot of information about this topic, and I'm hoping that everyone learns something new today. I'm going to give the screen over to Lisbeth so she can introduce herself, as well as talk about what she does at the CCADV.
Hello, my name is Lisbeth Padilla, and I am the Director of Training and Prevention at the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Today, I will be explaining a bit about CCADV, who we are and what we do. And later in the presentation, I will be giving a short breakdown of what is domestic violence and the methods of control that can be used by someone inflicting harm. CCADV is the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We believe that domestic violence is a public health crisis that is preventable, and we work daily across many facets as a collaborative system to combat DV through methods of prevention and intervention. As a coalition, we focus on outreach and education to build awareness statewide. Our work helps to transform political, economic, and social responses to end violence in Connecticut.
Thank you so much, Lisbeth, for that introduction. Before we continue this video, I would like to inform everybody about the content within this presentation. There are some terms, definitions, and content that can be triggering for some people, especially younger ears, so we advise everyone to pause the video and walk away if necessary. The information said here today is simply for the purpose of educating people about this topic, not to make anyone feel uncomfortable or nervous. We will touch upon 6 important topics today, as well as give time at the end of the video for anyone to fill out a feedback survey if they would like to. The subjects we are going to discuss will be: what are sexual and domestic violence? How does this affect someone mentally and physically? The warning signs of someone in a violent situation. How to help someone in a violent situation. How to protect yourself in a violent situation, and important resources if necessary, and then of course the optional survey which I mentioned before. Alright, so once again, our first section is going to be: what are sexual and domestic violence? In a simpler context, sexual violence is an umbrella term for harmful or unwanted sexual actions, attempts, or behaviors one person may invoke or force onto another. This, in most cases, causes the receiving end to feel threatened, unsafe, or can result in them being injured either mentally or physically, and it can have a large effect on a person's life. Some examples of sexual violence are sexual assault and sexual abuse. Sexual assault is when a person either touches another or forces them into sexual activities without proper consent. The word proper is added into this definition because outside factors can cause someone not to be able to legally give consent. Examples of these reasonings can be when a person is unconscious, under the influence of drugs or alcohol, if they're physically hurt, not in the correct mental state, has any sort of mental incapacity, or is under the age of legal consent, which in Connecticut is 16. Sexual abuse are acts of unwanted sexual assault that are committed by someone in a higher power of authority onto someone who is vulnerable. In most cases, this lasts for a long period of time and is a calculated process where the offender forces or lures a victim into a relationship. In many of these cases, the victim is forced to maintain secrecy about the relationship, and they are threatened by the person committing these abusive acts. These two types of violence can be very similar and even intertwined at times. In many cases, the main differences between the two is that sexual assault happens to adults and happens only once, while sexual abuse happens to children or happens multiple times or throughout a long period of time. Though there are many situations where these can be different. The examples on this page show examples of both sexual assault and of sexual abuse, as well as some situations that could fall under both categories. We recommend that you take a picture of this information so you can refer back to it if ever necessary. Another very important type of sexual violence is sexual manipulation. This is very common in relationships with younger people because at least one party is not educated about what is right and what is wrong when it comes to having a sexual relationship. In simple terms, sexual manipulation is when the victim is being coerced into doing sorts of sexual activities due to threatening, guilt-tripping, or sulking when the offender does not get their way. Examples of this would be someone saying something along the lines of, "If you don't want to have sex with me, then I guess you don't love me," or "If you don't want to be with me, I guess I'll just hurt myself." Quotes like these puts the victim into an uncomfortable place where it seems almost impossible to say no to the offender. There are also cases of sexual manipulation where the offender gives or forces substances onto the victim simply for the intention of taking advantage of them at their low points. The next section of this presentation is going to be explained and presented by Lizbeth Padilla.
This section covers the definition of domestic violence and methods of control. The legal definition of domestic violence was updated in July 2021 through Public Act number 21-78. It is a continuous threat of present physical pain or physical injury against a family or household member. It includes stalking, a pattern of threatening and coercive control of a family or household member. Let's look at that a little more in depth. The working definition of domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in an intimate relationship where one partner tries to control and dominate the other. The behavior can be abusive physically, sexually, and/or coercive in nature, assaulting, threatening, harassing, strangling, or stalking an intimate partner is a crime in the state of Connecticut. Domestic violence is a pattern of behaviors. It is not an isolated incident. Often the behaviors are subtle and they escalate over time. Little by little, the relationship can increase from unhealthy to abusive. And while in hindsight, there are often red flags and warning signs, oftentimes the pattern is not always easily recognized by the victim until the escalation occurs. So let's get a little bit into the methods of control, or more commonly as they are labeled, the forms of abuse. Methods of control within a dynamic of domestic violence can include physical and sexual abuse, which are often the methods most discussed or widely recognized. However, just as impactful, abusive, and traumatic are those that are coercive in nature. These can often be less obvious methods of control and are referred to as resulting in invisible injuries. These are emotional, psychological, technological, and financial. Methods of coercive control are different from physical violence. The impact is invisible, a bruise or injury that no one else can physically see, but is still impacting the mind, body, and soul. These methods are ones that we need to continue to increase education and awareness around, as they often can be methods of control that are used that go unnoticed or unvalidated. Let's talk briefly about what coercive control is to better understand the methods that can be inflicted on someone impacted by domestic violence. The term coercive control was coined in 2007 by Dr. Evan Stark, who described it as an ongoing pattern of domination by which abusive partners primarily interweave repeated physical and sexual violence with intimidation, sexual degradation, isolation, and control. He goes on to discuss the feeling of entrapment as an outcome of coercive control. with the abuser intentionally working to entrap the victim in a hostage-like situation, inflicting on one's dignity, liberty, autonomy, personhood, and their physical and psychological integrity. This impact is often discussed by survivors. The control is not just psychological, it's structural, and the actions are calculated, intentional, and premeditated. Acts that are coercive in nature intend to exert power and control over every aspect of someone's existence. Coercive control, as defined within the Public Act, can include isolating a family or household member from friends, relatives, or other sources of support, depriving the family or household member of basic necessities, controlling, regulating, or monitoring the family or household member's movements, communications, daily behavior, finances, economic resources, or access to services, compelling the family or household member by force, threat, or intimidation, including but not limited to threats based on actual or suspected immigration, committing or threatening to commit cruelty to animals that intimidates the family or household member, enforcing acts or threats of a sexual nature, included but not limited to threatened acts of sexual conduct, threat based on a person's sexuality, or threats to release sexual image. Let's review a bit of the methods. First, we have physical violence, which includes anything physical in nature. It can be hitting, pushing, punching, shoving, biting, restraining, etc. Next, we have sexual violence, which can also be physical in nature, such as coercing or forcing someone to have sex or unwanted touching. It can also include things like controlling birth control or the use of condoms. Research has shown that the sexual violence perpetrator is often someone one knows, which can be in the form of a partner. So sexual violence within the context of a relationship is very much real and occurs more often than reported. Per CDC, 1 in 4 women and more than 1 in 10 men have experienced sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. Emotional or psychological control can include being possessive or controlling by having guidelines and rules of where someone can go, who they can talk to, times to check in with their partner, being isolated from friends and family, invading their privacy, keeping track of them, or monitoring them, such as their location, phones, or social media, blaming and punishing, belittling, insulting, or criticizing them, and really any combination of things that can impact the mental health and psyche of another, and having it labeled as being done out of love. Research shows that emotional abuse is often a precursor to physical abuse. In addition, there is a high correlation between physical abuse and emotional abuse, with verbal abuse often predicting subsequent physical abuse in intimate relationships. The CDC states 61 million women and 53 million men have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Technology in this day and age is a big method of control. It can be used to threaten, coerce, monitor, violate, exploit, and track victim survivors through their location, correspondence, finances, etc. This is called digital abuse. One of the most difficult things about technology is that it is ever evolving. There are so many ways digital abuse can take place through apps and devices, and that can make it difficult to know how it is being used or that it is being used at times. Lastly, we have financial abuse as a method of control. This is one that as advocates we see used often. It is a big factor in making someone feel trapped and unable to leave. It can be a multitude of things, including forcing someone to be dependent on the person exhibiting abuse, not being allowed full access to money, for example, receiving allowances or having to ask for money, sabotaging work opportunities so they are unable to keep a job, denying access to finances or financial information. This method can create a barrier, making it difficult to leave as they may be unable to afford to start over, or the abuser has convinced them that financially they will not succeed without them.
Before we advance on to our next section, I would like to give everyone some statistics about sexual violence. Out of the total reports of people who have been assaulted, about 70% of them are children who are under the age of 18. While it may seem more common that adults are assaulted, it happens to children and adolescents a lot more than people understand or believe. The average age group of people who undergo sexual violence is between 7 and 13, as we stated before, with the average age being just 9 years old. These statistics I just mentioned are based off of only roughly 15% of assaults, because the other approximately 85% of assaults are never reported in the first place. In 90% of situations, the abuser is somebody that the child knows, loves, or trusts. It is more common that an adolescent undergoes abuse from somebody they know rather than a stranger. Out of all child sex offenders, 70% of them have 1 to 9 victims, 20% of them have 10 to 40 victims, and the other 10% have more than 40 victims. Each year, there are approximately 158,000 teen pregnancies, and around 95,000 of these pregnancies, or 60%, are caused by an act of sexual violence. The next section we are going to talk about is how sexual or domestic violence affects a person. Some short-term problems caused by the trauma of sexual assault or violence can include the symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. It can cause poor performance at school, early or multiple sexual partners for the victim, and problems within their relationships, including ones with family, friends, or their partners. While these problems can last for a short period of time, they can also affect somebody long-term. As for the long-term effects of somebody who has undergone sexual violence, a study carried out in Greater London shows the changes in mental and physical health of these victims. These statistics are based off of 1 year after their assault happened. All 75 adolescents aged 13 to 18 had undergone sexual assault within the past 6 weeks of the beginning of this study. 95% of them were female, 44% were white, and 68% had come from deprived areas. At the beginning of the study, 90% of the adolescents had symptoms of PTSD and depression, while a little bit over 75% had anxiety symptoms. After 1 year, 72% of them still had PTSD symptoms, while only 64% had depressive symptoms and 60% had anxiety symptoms. These results prove that while time does help a lot of people in their recovery process, sexual violence does have a long-term impact on people, especially on children. Of the 75 adolescents in this study, originally, less than 50% of them were getting support or going to therapy, but after 1 year, 80% of these adolescents were receiving support and therapy to help with their recovery process. As for the physical symptoms of these adolescents after 1 year, the majority of them had worsening and more frequent headaches and stomach pains. Almost 90% of them were sleeping more poorly, in contrast to the almost 50% from the beginning of the study. On the other hand, their appetites had grown from 75%, and over 80% of these children were accessing health care, opposed to the 65% at the beginning of the year. On a sadder note, more than half of the kids were self-harming after a year of their assault, while under 40% of them were at the beginning of the study. A quarter of the children began self-harming after the assault, but not all who had been self-harming before continued their self-harm after a year. The next page is going to discuss the warning signs of somebody in a violent situation. You should never assume that someone is in a violent situation unless either you witness it or they tell you, but these are some signs that you should watch out for if you think that somebody is in danger. If someone is injured near the genitals, if someone's underwear seems to be recently stained, torn, or have blood on them, if someone frequently gets urinary tract infections, yeast infections, or sexually transmitted diseases, or if someone is complaining of pain, itching, or burning within their genital area. Some behavioral changes in another person after they have been assaulted can be changes in their mental health. If they seem to have many or developing phobias about normal daily activities, an example being someone shrinking away or seeming threatened with even minor physical contact. If they have increased anxiety symptoms, seem to exhibit symptoms of depression or post-traumatic stress disorder, including expressing suicidal thoughts and self-harm, it may be a sign that this child has gone through sexual violence. It's very common for children to have trouble in school after they undergo this assault, including absences, drops in grades, relationship issues, and even dropping out of school completely. They can have change in their hygiene, whether it's refusing to bathe at all or bathing excessively. In many cases, an adolescent who has been abused in the past can have inappropriate sexual knowledge or behaviors due to their trauma. It is also common if the adolescent is a sibling that they become more protective or concerned for their other siblings by assuming a caretaker role in their family. Or it is also common for the adolescent to resort to behaviors of children younger to them, an example of this being thumb sucking or wetting themselves. There are many more signs that someone has undergone sexual violence, but these seem to be the most common in many situations within adolescence.
The fourth section that we are going to discuss is how to help somebody who has already been sexually harmed. The first thing that you're going to need to do is express care and concern for the person. Be there for them, talk to them, and ask them what you can do to help them out. They have just gone through something that's so traumatic that is very difficult to talk about with other people, so remind them that they are brave for being so open with you. You should also encourage them to receive immediate medical attention. Undergoing sexual violence can take a toll on someone's health, both mentally and physically, so remind them to get an examination and receive mental support. In addition to this, remind them that they need to be tested for various strains of sexually transmitted diseases, since they can be potentially severely harmful to a person. Once someone has been sexually harmed, it's important to give them time and space as well. They need to process what happened to them and take the time to recover. Don't ask them a million questions, and don't force them to do anything that they don't want to do, an example being talking to authorities or adults about the situation. Remind them that they are not alone. Let them know that you care about them and that this was not their fault. People in a lot of cases want to blame themselves for what they've gone through, but it's not a victim's fault, but the offender's. Help them to understand their options to continue to move forward. Don't force them to do something they don't want to do, but do encourage them to talk to authorities or other adults that can help. Also, remind them that when they receive medical attention, they can ask for a rape kit. A rape kit is a package of medical equipment to gather evidence to aid the investigation and prosecution of a suspected offender. The test allows detectives to gather DNA evidence against the offender to warrant their arrest and bring them to trial. Since the person who underwent sexual violence would have their genitals touched in order to gather the necessary evidence, they do need to give consent before following through with this test. In many cases, the victim is traumatized and doesn't want their genitals touched directly after the attack, which is why someone should never feel forced to do this. In order to follow through with this investigation, though, and collect the evidence that's needed, the victim has to be tested within 72 hours after the attack, which is why it's a good idea that when talking to someone about their options, that you mention this test immediately. And finally, you need to make sure you maintain confidentiality. As much as you want to tell an adult about this, it's not your place to do so. The person trusted you, and the victim needs to tell a trusted adult or law enforcement, but they don't need to feel forced to do this. They need to choose the time that they think is right, and to some people, that time is never. In addition, don't tell any of your peers about someone else's business. The victim will most likely already feel bad about what happened, so if everybody else knows, it'll only make them worse having them all stare at her or them. The next subject we'll talk about is how to keep yourself and other people safe. First, there are some things that you should always do when being out in public. First off, be aware of your surroundings. Knowing where you are and who is around you may help you to find a way to get out of a bad situation. It's also important to understand your surroundings so you don't get lost and be put into a bad situation. It's essential to try to avoid isolated areas as well. It's more difficult to get help if nobody is around you. You also want to make sure that you walk with a purpose. Even if you don't know where you're going or what you're doing, act like you do, because otherwise you can seem more vulnerable to others around you. Always make sure to trust your instincts no matter what. If a situation or a location seems unsafe or uncomfortable, it probably is not the best place to be, so do whatever you can to bring yourself to somewhere you feel comfortable and safe. When walking, try not to load yourself down with packages or bags, as this can make you seem more vulnerable and can slow you down when trying to get out of a place fast. You need to make sure that your phone is with you and is charged at all times, and that you have cab money to leave whenever you are ready and you need to get home safely. Don't ever allow yourself to be isolated with somebody you don't trust or someone you don't know, since you never know who is trying to hurt you. Also, if you are walking while listening to music, Avoid putting headphones in both ears so you can be more aware of your surroundings, especially if you are walking alone. We are also going to discuss how to protect yourself or how to protect others in the following situations. We're going to talk about the social situations, if you or someone you know is being pressured, how to be a bystander, and then how to be an ally. The first thing we are going to do is give you some tips on how to stay safe when you're in social settings. When you do go to a social gathering, go with a group of friends. Make sure you all arrive together, check in with each other throughout the evening, and leave together at the end of the night. Always make sure you know where you are and who is around you, since it may help you to find a way out of a bad situation. Like we touched upon earlier, always trust your instincts. If you do not feel safe in any situation, go with your gut and do what you think is best. Also, if you see something suspicious, call law enforcement immediately. When you do get a drink, don't leave it unattended ever. If you've left your drink alone, get a new one. Never take the chance. You never know what someone's going to put into your drink, which leads me to the next tip. Don't ever accept drinks from people you don't know or trust. If you do decide to accept a drink, go with the person to the bar to order it. Watch it being poured and carry it out yourself. When you're at parties, also don't drink from common open containers such as punch bowls, kegs, or other large containers. When you're out with a group, watch out for your friends and make sure that they are watching out for you. If a friend seems out of it, seems intoxicated, or is acting out of character, get them to a safe place immediately. If you suspect that the friend has been drugged, contact law enforcement immediately. When questioned by the EMTs, if this does happen, be detailed with them so they can give your friend the correct test or correct help. Going out can be very dangerous depending on your surroundings, but if you're with a group and you're aware of your surroundings, you can do everything in your power to keep you and the people around you safe. In situations where you feel as though you are being pressured, remember that being in this situation is not your fault. The person who is making you uncomfortable is to blame. You need to be true to yourself, like we said before. Don't feel obligated to do anything you don't want to do, and do what feels right to you and what you are comfortable with. A tip is to come up with a safety system with your friends or your family to be able to get out of uncomfortable situations if you run across them. An example of this would be to have a code word. If you're out and you don't feel comfortable, you can use this code so your friends and family can make an excuse for you to leave. With that, you can leave without the person you were with knowing that you're uncomfortable with them. If you don't want to hurt the person's feelings or put yourself in a possibly dangerous situation, it is okay to lie. Examples of different lies you can use is needing to take care of a friend or family member, say that you're not feeling well, or that you have somewhere else that you need to be. Wherever you are, try to think of an escape route. Ask yourself, how would you get out of this room? Where are the doors, the windows? Are there people around you might be able to ask for help? Is there an emergency phone nearby? And lastly, if you and or the other person have been drinking, say that you would rather wait until you both have full judgment before doing anything you may regret later. When you're intoxicated, it may be hard to control yourself and your actions. You never want to put yourself in a situation where you may possibly end up having sexual relations with another person while being intoxicated, because this is considered sexual assault, as we talked about earlier, and you or the other person can get in big trouble. Another protection method that you need to use when you're out is to be a bystander in situations where you can. Being a bystander is being present at an event or an incident, but not taking part in the incident. If you see that someone's in danger, you can help, but before stepping in, make sure to evaluate the risk. If it means putting yourself in danger, contact law enforcement instead. If everything seems safe for you to step in and offer assistance, then do so. Ask if the person needs help and let them know that you're there to help them. If you do step in, do not leave. If you remain at the scene and you are a witness, the perpetrator is less likely to do anything. If you know the perpetrator, then tell the person you do not approve of their actions and tell them to leave the potential victim alone. On the same wavelength as being a bystander, be an ally. When you go to a party, go with a group of friends, arrive together, check in with each other frequently, and then leave together, like we talked about before. Have a buddy system, especially in larger social situations. Stay with at least one trusted person at all times, and do not be afraid to let a friend know if you are worried about their safety or your own. If you see someone who is intoxicated, offer to call them a cab. Make sure they aren't putting themselves in danger by driving, taking a ride with someone who is also intoxicating, or going home with somebody who doesn't seem to be trustworthy. Especially in bigger places, you need to watch out for those around you. Your safety needs to be your top priority, but it's very easy for someone to get lost or hurt when you're with a big crowd of strangers, so you do need to be cautious about where you go, what you do, and what your friends are doing. This all is important when talking about sexual violence because it is very common for someone to be drugged or to be taken advantage of when they've had too much to drink, or even just to be taken out of a crowd of people when nobody is looking. This is especially true for adolescents, since they seem to be more vulnerable for being smaller, in quotes, and young. Just make sure that when you go out, you're being cautious of what's around you, and if you're with a group of friends, make sure they are also safe. Our next section is going to be dedicated to giving you some possible resources that could be helpful for if you or someone you know is suffering with domestic or sexual violence, as well as a few more helpful resources. First, Lisbeth is going to talk about the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence and how they help people who have undergone domestic violence. And then I'm going to discuss some other resources you can use or someone else can use if necessary. We do recommend taking pictures of these pages to save for future reference.
In Connecticut, we have a two-pronged system. Safe Connect is our statewide info line hotline, a centralized point of contact that is open 24/7 and available to anyone no matter where you are located in the state. Calls come to Safe Connect as a triage point. Clients are assessed for safety plans are put in place, and intakes are completed with a client. Those intakes are then submitted to the membership organization located in their area of residence. As a coalition, we lead a statewide network of 18 membership sites across the state to help cover all areas. Those organizations work in direct care with clients through advocacy, services, and support. Let's look a bit at both of these systems. Through Safe Connect, we are able to streamline the many access points that have existed for survivors seeking domestic violence supports in Connecticut. Where we once had several hotlines throughout the state covering our 18 membership sites, we now have this one main number that allows for anyone to contact at any point of the day. They are assessed and connected to their local organizations. Safe Connect has multiple modes of communication, including call, text, email, or live chat. To call or text, you would utilize the 888-774-2900. To email, one would utilize the Safe Connect at ctcadv.org. And for the live chat, one would log on to the ctsafeconnect.org website, and an option to chat now pops up. All access points are available 24/7, 365. We have language line available in addition to having multiple multilingual staff on hand. What you can expect when calling Safe Connect includes a live greeting by one of our trained advocates, a risk assessment and safety plan, information on resources and supports, and a warm handoff or connection to a domestic violence organization in your region. All services are free and voluntary as well as confidential. We are mandated reporters, but we do let all callers know they are free to remain anonymous. Our membership sites consist of 15 organizations with 18 sites statewide. Here is a map of the 18 sites around the state. Every area has a designated organization to help support. Services provided by membership include safety planning, counseling, and mental health supports, as well as court advocacy, case management, or connection with basic needs, information, and referrals. There's also education and trainings that can be conducted. As a network, we serve everyone and anyone, including victims and survivors seeking information or support, family or friends, and for anyone who suspects that someone they know is experiencing abuse and wants guidance on how to talk about it, and professionals at any level looking to seek support, resources, or information to best support clients or patients they may be working with. If you have any other questions or would like more information, please feel free to contact me directly at the information on your screen.
Thank you so much, Lisbeth, for that information.
Now I'm going to talk about some of the other resources you can use. The National Sexual Assault Hotline and the National Sexual Assault Online Hotline is a phone number used as a crisis service as well as a helpline in sexually violent situations. RAIN, or the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which is the largest anti-sexual violence organization, is who created and operates this hotline. The number for this hotline is 1-800-656-4673. Again, the number is 1-800-656-4673. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is a confidential support system to anyone who has undergone domestic violence or knows someone who is dealing with it. The number for this is 800-799-7233. Again, 800-799-7233. The Suicide and Crisis Hotline is for anyone who needs support for their mental health. If someone you know or you are experiencing suicidal thoughts, call 988 to receive emotional support. Again, that number is just 988. The last hotline I have here is the SAMHSAS's National Hotline, which is also known as their Treatment Referral Routing Service. It is a confidential, free information service for people facing mental and or substance use disorders. The service provides referrals to local treatment facilities, support groups, and community-based organizations. If you know someone or you are struggling with mental health or a substance abuse disorder, call 1-800-662-HELP or 4357. Again, that number is 1-800-662-HELP or 4357. This next section is not necessarily informational, but if you can, please fill out the feedback form so we can help spread education about this topic in a more beneficial and effective way. It would be extremely helpful so I can edit any of my information so everyone can gain a better understanding of what sexual and domestic violence truly are. The link will be in the description if you decide to fill this out. Thank you so much to everyone who watched this video. We hope that this helped you to understand the important topic further, as well as help people to understand how to help others in threatening situations. Everyone needs to stick together and help each other out because this world can be very dangerous. But if we are all working together, we will be able to avoid bad situations more often. Thank you again so much for watching this video and giving me your support. Stay safe.